Right. It is such an honor to be here. And I've driven through Columbus, but I've never really stopped on campus before. And what you have going here is extraordinary. I'm pretty connected in the impact investing space all over the world. And the depth of the presentations and the students and everyone is blowing me away. Now, you should applaud yourself here. This is an amazing event, I must say. And this coming from someone who grew up near Penn State and had a daughter who went to Michigan. But yesterday, I thought I've watched football games at the Shoe all my life. And I was staying at the Blackwell, and I had to walk over to the stadium yesterday, and as I got closer and closer, I kept getting more electric. I touched that building, and something I'm like, there's something in the water here. You guys have got this figured out. So anyway, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Jibu as an example, a case study for maybe some ideas that could inspire you to what your next big thing is. So what we're doing at Jibu, we're trying to tackle two problems. The first one being a lack of meaningful entrepreneurial opportunity and employment in most emerging markets. The unemployment rate is at least 35% in these markets, higher for 60%, double that for youth, and very few true great ownership opportunities, particularly for women. So that's one problem we're trying to tackle, and the other being about over 1 billion people in the world don't have access to affordable drinking water on a daily basis. They might drink it once in a while, but every day it's just not available. In fact, I don't know if you would know this, but about half of water projects in the world, wells that are drilled, tend to fail within a couple years. And it's because of typically a lack of sustainability in the programs. A part breaks, they don't know what to do in the village or whatever. They go back, they take the pump apart, and they're back to where they started again. So we're trying to tackle those two problems. So how we're doing it is through reframing the drinking water crisis into a bite-sized enough problem that a network of entrepreneurs can solve. So for us, what this means is, I particularly use the word franchisees. You'll get to hear a little bit about our franchise model. It's one of the ways that we make it bite-sized. But it's a network of franchisees who are 100% owners of businesses, but they're in a network with others. And their ownership is based on a franchise agreement that keeps them, it's a contractual relationship we have with them that keeps them focused on all the right things that we're trying to accomplish and gives them best business practices and keeps them aligned with our social impact goals. We are focused on the urban, poor areas. We're not focused on rural areas. And I'll point this out too. We don't drill for water. What we're doing is we locate storefronts about a football field from whatever the water source is in these urban communities. And then we draw the water into the back of the store. The back of the store is a mini water production plant. And you can see the water filtration unit. It can filter water from about any source, make it pure. It's then bottled in our own branded bottles. And it seems to be, well, what's unusual about that? Well, the plastic's super hard to handle all the rugged African environment, lasts about 10 times longer than their plastic, so it's reusable. And the tap, you wouldn't think that's an innovation. But how do people buy these 5-gallon sizes without a dispenser? They have no way of accessing that water. So it's actually a very unusual product that way. And really what we believe, this water is not only pure, but it's sealed, and it has a government stamp on it, sort of an FDA stamp of approval. We go to that effort because what we find is people buy trust first. People need to trust the water that it's safe to drink. It's water that you and I, anybody would feel safe drinking. We thought, what's the good of putting good water in a bad bottle? Which is usually what happens in there's ways to sanitize and all that, but an open container, taking that home, really isn't, we think, the best idea. So what we do is we map out whole countries into about 1-mile radius territories. And those territories function as the territory the franchisee operates within. And so they're constrained to penetrate those neighborhoods within that territory. It's meant to be walkable distance, but there's also delivery, which I'll explain in a minute. And we enforce that so that they have a protected territory to be able to sell to. So we are currently in We're in 3 countries directly and a couple other countries indirectly. So we're in Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. We're also just starting in Zimbabwe and in Tanzania with a model where we license the top business person in those countries to function as the franchisor on our behalf. So, and by the end of the year, we'll probably be in Zambia and Congo too. So in the beginning of 2015, we had 2 franchises in 2 countries. That was in Uganda and Rwanda. We now have about 250, so it's grown very fast. We're launching about 1 new business or so a week. Now, when I get to this point, people say, how in the world did you start, why did you start doing this? How did you start doing this? Okay, so I've seen other people with their pictures of what they did before. So here's me back in the 1890s. Okay, so I was a pastor at one time, which aged me very much. I was a professor then, as you can relate here being in school. And after that, I had a very strong entrepreneurial career. I got very fortunate in the dot-com era. I was in the software field, created businesses and sold them, and then happened to be at the right place during 9/11. I ended up being in the space industry related to, won a big contract right before 9/11 happened, and our technology happened to be exactly what was needed for that effort. Alongside my for-profit career, I've also had a strong nonprofit focus, and it's developed into a focus on 2 things: Africa, I've been going to Africa for about 25 years, and international leadership development. So I've had all this going on, and then after I sold a business, I became an angel investor. So you can see all this that's happening in my life. So I was doing impact investing before I even understood what the term impact investing was. So you can see the absolute trash heap my mind was. Okay, who am I? What do I do? I sold a business trying to figure out what to do. You'll see a World Vision. I got hired into World Vision as a volunteer contractor to help them figure out why half of their water projects were failing. And I said to them, you have the wrong person. I know nothing about water. And they said, that's perfect. We want someone who understands business models and whatever to help us figure out why ours aren't working. So I'm trying to figure out that they didn't go forward with that project. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I make sense of all this? What's the perfect thing to do? Well, start a business in Africa with your son in 3 countries simultaneously on a limited budget. So that's what we did in 2012. We started in, well, I'll give you the history real quick, but my son was the one invited here. He lives in Uganda now, and so I'm the backup, okay? I'm actually on my way to Africa, actually, after this conference, but he's really the one who runs the company from there, and I spend 4 or 5 months of the year there. Quick history, mid-2012 is when we started, and we bootstrapped. We had enough money for about 1.5 years, and we needed to figure out. We had all these crazy ideas of what should be done, should not be done. He was actually in the Peace Corps in Morocco doing water projects and had some learnings that he brought back, things that I learned. We thought, how can we combine this together? And we decided we wanted to learn from all that we had. We wanted to do some new things. So we did something that everybody said was really stupid. We launched in 3 countries simultaneously, Rwanda, Uganda, and DRC, Congo, at the same time, figuring that at least 2 of them would fail. And we'd learn, and then we doubled down where it works. So we sort of took a portfolio approach, the way a venture capitalist would, that would have like 10 companies and figure out 2 are home runs and 5 are dogs and all of that. We figured the same thing. We thought maybe all 3 would fail, but the thing we wanted to avoid was a false positive. We're trying to build a globally scalable model that could grow quickly. So we wanted to find out what's the common core of what you could do. We didn't want a false positive where we worked in one place, but we tried to go to the next place, and then we were starting over from scratch. We also didn't want to fail and then think it's a bad idea, and it might have been a good idea because these countries are really different. So anyway, DRC, Congo, failed. But we had 2 working in Uganda and Rwanda at the time. And we went through a raise of money, about a $3 million raise. And the goal of that money was, can we scale? Do we have something that's scalable from 2 franchises in 2 countries? So in 2015 and 2016, we went from 2 franchises to about over 200. We're at about 250 franchises now, which includes franchises and micro-franchises. So we're launching about 1 new business per week. We just completed a $7 million Series B, just actually in December of this year. And we're piloting, as I mentioned, what we call an area master franchisor model, where we're licensing top business people in some other places. And so by 2018, we think we're going to have where our model works in denser areas. We think we're going to have Rwanda saturated, and we're going back to DRC and a few other places. So a few more things about the details of our model here. So how we keep water affordable is really three ways. It's wholesale, direct to consumer. So there's no middleman. So in the bottled water market, the water bottlers have these big factories. They produce the water, they put it on trucks, they sell it to a middleman, like a corner store, which is then sold to all that chain adds a lot of cost to the price of water. So our water is about $1 for 20 liters. 20 liters is about 5 gallons. Ours 20 is a little bit more than 5 gallons. So that price is lower than the cost to boil. So our customers they don't tend to drink the bottled water or have home filtration. They either boil or they don't treat their water, one or the other. Secondly, very little plastic waste. As I mentioned, the bottle was made of a special type of plastic so it's a propane gas tank exchange idea. They pay once for a deposit in a bottle, and then they return the empty and they get a full one. That's what keeps the price down too. And we can use those bottles over 100 times versus 8 to 10 times of a typical, even plastic bottle. And we reduce the transport costs because the territories are small enough people can walk, or they can pay for a little bit extra for boys on bikes. We call them delivery, so it can be someone who walks or delivers for a very small. We don't make any money on those things, but it's just there. Now I want to point out the pyramid here. People talk about, do you serve the bottom of the pyramid? Our personal belief is the bottom of the pyramid is different for every product in every part of the world. For water, you have to drink it every day and exclusively. If I had a glass of water up here, here's a cup. Well, there is water in this. How about that? I didn't know that was even, okay, so I could drink great water all week. If I drink this now, I will be ill. And so would most of you. Now, a lot of them develop different ways of coping with that in their body, but children can't stand that. But they believe that if I drink good water 4 days a week, it's okay to drink bad water 3 days a week, or they can't afford it. So to them, it's like an accounting problem. I'm like, no, it's not. You need to drink it all the time. So for water, the bottom of the pyramid is 90%. It's not just the poorest to poor in the bottom 20%. Our target market's really the middle 70%, but we also have a program to subsidize the cost for that bottom 20%. But only the top 10% can really afford to have safe water every day exclusively. So one of the things that we focused on, this was one of our things when we started, is we don't want people to be buying water because they should. We want them to buy water because they want to, because it's great to buy water. So we have aspirational looking bottles. We're leveraging the advertising that all these big water bottlers do, and so it's a cool thing to have the water. But also, if you look at this list, we have a stupid little acronym, TRUST there, as I mentioned earlier. People are buying trust. But if you look at what those things are, these are things most of these things are not typically what the water sector is focused on. They just said, you should drink that water because it's good for you. It's sort of like medicine. But people want quality first. They have to trust that the water's good. They want a radically low price. Maybe that's the one thing that's common across the water sector, either free or really cheap. Everybody wants that. But the other things, usable, cool bottles. Reusable, people want that. It's a cool bottle that they want to have. I walk through hotels when we were doing this. Everybody wants a bottle when they see it, if they've never seen it before. Super convenient because it's close. And this is the big thing, tastes great. And this is something where, we had this theory that folks that are underprivileged, we believe that they care as much about taste, maybe more, than folks that are privileged. And it makes sense when you think about it. It's a small pleasure. It's why ice cream sales go up during depressions, because it's a small thing that you can do to treat yourself. People care about taste. So a lot of times what water sector has done is just dump chlorine in the water to make it safe. But it tastes like you're drinking water out of your pool. And no one really likes the flavor of chlorine. So it's things like that matter, that you treat them the same as you would anybody in this room. The same things you want are the same things they want. These are things you would want in your water. So this is our value proposition. And it's really finding out, we've learned this over time. We didn't start out knowing all this. Our franchisees, and that's why when they're owners, it's their baby, and they figure these things out. So they tell us these things, and this is how we develop. And all the speakers have talked about that, how you pivot and learn from on the ground. Our secret sauce really is social franchising. So franchising doesn't exist in a few of the countries. We're the first franchisor in a few of the countries we exist in. Now, franchising means you're 100% owner of your business, but you're under contractual relationship. There's conditions where that ownership can be withdrawn if you don't follow quality standards, or there's a number of other rules that are built into that document. It's not known. But here's why this is cool. True ownership there's all these studies that show when you're an owner of something, you put 35% more of yourself into it. Even if you're paid a lot or you have a great job, when it's your baby, you're going to get the passion, the problem solving. You're going to get all those juices flowing that aren't there. You're going to wake up. I wake up in the middle of the night almost every night, and I'm thinking of something new. I wish I didn't. I mean, it's like a curse almost sometimes. It's like, it's my baby, you know? And when it's their baby, that's how they think, because their livelihoods depend on it. And that's why, when I was at World Vision, that was our theory, because there was no real ownership on the ground, is why those wells could go derelict. You know, with your baby, you're not going to let that happen. But it's also a revocable franchise license. So we keep them focused on those poor territories and those neighborhoods, and the way they make money is penetrating deeper and deeper and deeper into those territories. And it creates a greater success rate. You know that small business startups in the Western world, after 5 years, only about 20% of them are still in business. But you know in the Western world, franchise businesses, it's flipped. It's 80% success after 5 years. So because you're basically providing some tracks to run on, and you're providing a network of peers who care. I mean, our network of peers, they police each other. Originally, they saw the other franchisees as competition. They now see them as extra sales agents. You know, so when you have hundreds of stores around an area with signs up, that's all a good thing. And that key is us protecting their territories. So now, one of our innovations is really, we function as a bank. Now, what I mean by that is this. You know, someone else mentioned earlier today, and we've always said this, you've heard the whole saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. How we go a third step. We say, what good is it to teach a man to fish, or a person to fish, if they can't afford the fishing tackle? You know, all that good knowledge goes to waste. And that's the problem in these developing markets, is because they have the knowledge. We can teach them all the right things about entrepreneurship, but how do they afford to really, you know, put it into practice? So these are the type of things we provide for them. And I'll show you in this next slide how this works. So here's the details of the franchise. Everybody asked me this, so I just put it on a slide. So the franchisee puts in about $2,000 up front. Now, that seems like a king's ransom. It is. The whole idea that isn't actually for us to make money, but it's necessary skin in the game to make sure they're an owner to start, and they pay their operating expenses, which are their employees, taxes, rent on the building. And we start at $200. And we had all these partnerships with microfinance institutions. We've never had to use them because of the rest of this. Their break even is 2 weeks to 5 months. Unbelievable. I mean, like, because of the brand has become so cool that the product sells. Once we sort of once we become known as a trusted brand, that it tastes good and all that, word spreads like wildfire. So these guys, mostly, I would agree with the previous speaker was talking about how women are the best. The women are always the best at selling the water. Okay, so I say guy sometimes because I'm an old guy, okay, but I meant women too, so please understood when I say that. Top line revenue that they make is $50,000 to $150,000 a year. I mean, these people were making, they weren't business people before typically, so I mean, really a very small fraction of that, living on maybe $6 to $10 a day, something like that, just to give you a sense. So their net profit is about 15 to 30% of that, which is what they take home after their operating expenses and after they pay us, which I'll explain. A lot of them use it to launch a second franchise, which we love. So they're growing. We want the good ones to be reproducing. Then the revenue share with us is based on a flat rate per liter. So all the water they sell, we have a water meter on our system. Every liter they sell, there's a set number, a penny or two, that goes to us. And the more they sell, they reach certain levels, that price goes down. So it incentivizes them to sell more because they make more money the more that they sell. The franchise model, by the way, is all about alignment, incentive alignments and all of that, both carrots and sticks, and making sure we as the franchisor are aligned with their goals and we're all together in what we're trying to accomplish. And now we're also selling related products. We never saw the company as just about water. It's really about a platform. So the previous speaker talked about a platform. I'm sorry, I forget the name, but anyway, she was talking about, think about this in terms of platform, one of the earlier speakers. So we're selling fortified porridge, for instance, now in Rwanda, which is cereal for kids. They complement our water products. So how we get paid, they put in 2,000, we put 18,000 in. And that's all the equipment you saw on the previous page. You know, the tanks, the water filtration equipment itself is about $14,000. And then the OPEX per franchise over 2 years for us is about $27,000. That's all of our overhead and things like that. Our break even is about 2.5 years on average. But it continues as an annuity forever. The amount may go down as they sell more water, but that's how we pay back our investors. And we're a for-profit. I'll explain that in a minute too, how that works. And our goal is to be better than sustainable. You know, we anticipate being profitable by about 2021. And really, I said at the bottom here, we're really not just about water. This is about really last mile distribution with water as an anchor product. If someone's giving me the message back there, I can't see because of the lights. Anyway, you're going to have to yell at me or something. So here's one more thing about how we're structured. It's a different structure. We're organized as what's called an L3C. How many of you have heard of an L3C? Okay, a few of you. An L3C is like an LLC. It's a for-profit partnership, but the third L stands for low profit. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to have low profits. It just means that we have to prioritize our charitable impact alongside profit making. So we're a hybrid for-profit is really what we are. And we also have a partner 501c3. I won't go into all that unless somebody has questions afterwards. So we've raised to date about $13 million, and out of that, 51% about is equity, so it's people buying into the company. About 18% grants and charity. 8% USAID was one of our first funders. It was a $1 million matching grant that they gave. And then this is the growing piece, is the blue piece in the right-hand corner of, about 23% is revenue we generate from the franchisees. Eventually, I want that blue to be the whole pie, pretty much. I mean, that's the goal. So that's a little bit about Jibu. Now, I want to share the last few slides here with you. Like, what about your next big thing? Yes? Is that 20 minutes? Yeah, I'll go quickly here. I really want time for questions. So, I'm going to give you 3 ideas. I think patronizing is insidious, and sometimes we're not aware if we do it. I do it all the time, and I'm not even aware I do it. So what we found, though, is people told us you can't really trust partners with a franchise model. You know, that you have to have a firm control on employees or whatever. We have found that to not be true. We have found that if you structure the relationship properly, that it's possible to really treat them with eye-to-eye peers the way you would go into business with anybody else in the world, even though they've not been in business. And we train them and do all those things. And of course, people prefer an opportunity over a handout. I mean, I just think sometimes people think that that's not true. But it's really, everybody wants to work. Everybody wants a job. I mean, that's the lack in the world to me with the economies. It's like so many things are about jobs. And there's unintentional patronizing that occurs. We treat them normally. We expect them to pay us. We expect them to perform. And it is reciprocal learning. I mean, it's like we learn as much from them as they do from us. It really is truly a business partnership. Now, here we go. Sustainability. Bad word. I'm sort of joking. Actually, I'm going to go back a slide here. Let's see. Well, yeah. This is our first sale this is one of our franchisees' first sale ever for Jibu when we were in Congo. So it was money actually. But we think that sometimes sustainability is too low of a bar. What person would ever go into business thinking, it's the same as the connotation of making enough to get by, which is a very good thing. It's better than being poor, okay? But people risk all for the sake of a bigger reward. There's a risk-reward calculus that everybody does in their mind. And if you want people really engaged, there has to be reward at the end. Charity will always be needed. And you see, we did receive grants. We received grants. There's reasons why charity will always be needed. But we use like the word self-propagation. So, and you can read some of the other ideas that we've got here in this. There's no perfect way to launch a social enterprise, but consider self-propagation, not just sustainability. I guess what I'm suggesting is raise the bar, look for business ideas that can generate enough profit to drive growth. And that, my opening slide was about lasting impact. I think this is how you create lasting impact. is because if you have a model that generates enough income to produce ongoing growth, that's a great thing. Not all models, though, are monetizable, nor am I suggesting they should be. There's many things, anyway, so you get the idea here. Known and proven. It's just not going to be, you're going to have to go out on the edge in order to be able to be game-changing, I think, many times. And so we built failure into our model. I told you we started in 3 countries with the idea that 2 would fail. That's exactly, we started creating a document called 50 Ways to Fail. It actually started as 25 ways to fail. We kept finding more ways. It's 50 ways to fail. We're now up over 300 ways to fail. We haven't changed the name yet. I mean, we capture our failures. We make small bets and figure out, build failure into your mindset. You're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. Plan on it. It's not the end of the world, but make small bets that aren't going to kill the business. And that's all the minimum viable product, something the other speakers were talking about, all of that's a very good thing. And always be transparent with your stakeholders. Always do that. They appreciate knowing exactly what's going on, and you should do that. Now, I wasn't going to share the slide. This was my last slide, but I have to. Does anybody know who this is? Good guess. Chariots of Fire. Yes, somebody know? Roger Bannister. Okay. Does anybody know what Roger Bannister is famous for? He's the first person to break 4-minute mile mark. I saw in the paper he died this morning. And I'm like, okay, so I need to tell you the quick story here about this, because this is an amazing story. Okay, so breaking the 4-minute mark was for a mile, with 1,600 meters today, was chased for thousands of years. It took 1,000 years to go from 5 minutes almost down to 4 minutes. It was at 4 minutes and 1 second for 17 years. People believed that not only wasn't it possible for a human to do it, they thought you'd die if you did it. It was physically impossible to do, or really bad for you. Roger Bannister was a student studying to be he was in medical school in the UK. And he started running as just a hobby. He came to believe that it really was possible to do it. So he crossed the finish line at 3 minutes and 59 seconds, whatever. And everybody, it was an incredible story. It was 1954. Okay, it took 7 weeks for someone to beat that record. And then 21 times over the next 3 years, the mark kept getting lower and lower. Now, the point here being, there are physical limits as to what a human can do. The record right now is 3 minutes and 43 seconds. It has stood for 20 years almost. So we might be reaching the limit of what humans can accomplish. But the point being, it was a mental barrier. People told him it wasn't possible to do. And that's where you get the disruption that's needed to create a lasting change. I'm going to stop there, and I'm glad to take any questions.
So there's going to be a mic coming around, so just when it comes to you.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for coming. My question is, how do you measure impact, either as an organization and then individually with your franchisees?
Great question. We have about 25 KPIs, and a subset of those is 3 or 4. So for us, actually, one of the things is aligning impact with making money in our model. We believe the integration of those things is very, so obviously the sale of water is obviously an impact. Now, it's hard to measure health impacts from water because people won't tell you the truth whether they drink water exclusively. They'll always say they're always drinking it. And they won't answer questions about, do your kids have more diarrhea or less? They'll say the kids never had diarrhea, you know? So it's really hard to get that type of qualitative data, but it's certainly the water sales. And then I think it's women employment. Our goal is to have at least 50% women. We're at about 40-some% now. It's harder to recruit women for this business for some reason, even though they're the best at it. You know, and it's youth employment. And it's actually, there's environmental things related to our bottles and a bunch of other things. We use solar in some of our locations, and there's other things.
The problem of safe water is one that a number of our local social enterprises are dealing with. It sounds like your container deals with the last 200-yard problem of how it can be delivered and consumed safely. But The problem we hear about a lot is that the wells fail. I didn't quite hear in your presentation how you're dealing with the well failure problem.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. By the way, this is a very mature audience, and I was more blunt with you than I typically am with others, knowing I'd be stirring the pot on the water sector, okay? So it was intentional. I think everything that can provide safe water to any person is a wonderful, wonderful thing that we support. So please don't take any of my comments as being negative. But to answer your question, we don't portray ourselves as water providers. We're water purifiers. And so we need water sources that are reliable. If we don't have that, we have to move a shop. So now, fortunately, the countries we're in, the water table is not a problem, at least yet. But we're not drawing any more from the water table than what people would anyway. What we're doing is, if you saw that first slide where people were standing there in the muddy water and drawing those jerry cans, that's a typical source that we use. So we're taking that same water, purifying it, and the particular technology we use only wastes about 5% of water versus reverse osmosis wasting about 40%. So we're very conscious of water conservation, in all that we do, but we haven't had a problem yet. Now, sometimes the water source will dry up, but it's usually not because of the water table, it's because of politics or someone's tapping into a line or those type of things, and that's something we work very hard to maintain. Someone up here.
Thanks. So I have two questions. My first question is, do you want my sunglasses?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. Just kidding.
I actually could see you.
Yeah.
In the back.
But my second question is more on your funding. You said 51% comes from investors.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you manage that relationship, how you got them on board with your mission, and how it's 51%, and how they interact with the other funding sources and just, the profit they want, and how does that whole relationship work?
Again, this is an example of a mature question, because I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that question, but it's in my heartbeat here. I've always wanted to change the paradigm of how Western resources are deployed in developing worlds, and I think there's three parties needed. It's the private capital of the businesses, it's the nonprofits and the foundations who understand on the ground, and it's government cooperation. So our vision from the start was to pioneer a way for those three to work together. And we've intentionally, that's part of what we challenge them with. It's like, you know what? You're not going to be just with your comfort zone. You're going to be out of your swim lane here. You're going to have people talking about impact, and they could give a rip about the financial reward. And you impact people, you're going to have to be comfortable with the business people, talking about making enough money to make a risk-adjusted return in these markets. Are we all cool with that? So, and we have a spectrum. If the spectrum is 0 to 100, and from impact being 0 and financial return being 100, I would say the band of all of our investors is somewhere 40 to 60%. So there's people, maybe 30 to 70. There's people far more on the impact side, but they're not 0 on the financial side. And we have ones that are more financial and not as concerned about impact, but we've learned how to work together. We have board meetings, and we have stakeholders. We call them stakeholders. We don't know what to call them. They're not just investors. So anyway, it's wild and woolly, but that's what I love, because we're getting people to think differently and cooperate in ways they normally wouldn't.
Are there any other questions?
There's one in the back there.
So you mentioned that you tend to cater to the 70% in the middle there. What does the subsidy program for the bottom 20% look like?
Yeah, it's called Water Club. And what we do is, and this is something we're actually just learning in the last 6 months. The barrier to entry for the people at the very bottom of the pyramid is not the price of our water, per se, it's the price of the bottle. The bottle costs about $8 or $9, okay? They can't afford that. So what we do is through donations, we subsidize the cost of that bottle, and then they pay for the water. And we're studying this more. If this is true, if we're able to validate this, we will produce some papers on this, because this blows to bits a lot of the assumptions that are in the water sector that poor people can't or won't afford the cost of safe water daily. They're willing to pay more than what we thought. So, but that's how it works, and so far it's pretty amazing. I mean, So, and again, it comes down to the aspirational aspect of this. The fact that the tap is accessible. I mean, they have limited resources, but it's something they understand the value of, particularly in urban areas. They're a little more like they see advertising, they get a little more education. If we were in rural areas, I'm not sure it would work as well. So, you know, we know sort of what we're focusing on.
Hello. My question is about the challenges of doing business in developing nations relative to developed nations, insofar as dealing with less infrastructure, less educated workforce, maybe for your franchisees, you know, other kind of challenges that you have, less skilled laborers, less money to go around in these areas. So is it a lot harder to do business there than here, or kind of what are the kind of ups and downs of dealing with that?
Boy, what a fantastic question. Like, the answer to your question is it's a little different in each country. But some of our things we have found, I'll tell you some obvious things, and I'll tell you some non-obvious things first, and I'll tell you some obvious things. One of the non-obvious things is in a franchise model, the reason you do a franchise model is lower cost of maintenance. You trust that the ownership passion will drive the desired outcome. But if people don't understand the franchise model and aren't used to being given that level of ownership, we end up doing more high touch and mentoring and working with people. I mean, we do all this anyway, but we're doing more than we thought we would have to do in order to train people how to be successful business people. I mean, they don't even know the difference when we start between profit and revenue. Okay, so they think if they got money in their pocket, it's revenue. Hey, I could go spend that, not really going to pay their employees and blah, blah. So we start there, but we go on from there. So that's one of the non-obvious ones. A couple of the obvious ones, the regulators can kill us. I mean, right now we're struggling with excise tax, which potentially doubles the price of our water in Kenya. And it's a price per liter. I won't go into all the details, but obviously we're a target, and the regulators and the governments think that we're this big company. Now, even though I'll give you the employment statistics, but it's like we're bringing people out of the informal economy into the formal economy. Their tax rate is going up as a result of us, but they see us. They sometimes assume that they're this big conglomerate and it's some trick we're playing or something. So they go after us and try to hit us with taxes that really aren't fair. You know. So by the way, so we employ about 40 people worldwide. 37 of those are in Africa. I'm one of the few that lives in the US. I spent about 4 or 5 months in Africa. Our franchisees employ about 800 people. You know, so these are almost all these people were in the informal economy before. They're now registered taxpayers. The businesses are paying taxes. We believe in paying taxes. And I mentioned the government, you know, they can't service unless we're paying taxes. So it's not like we're against taxes. We just want fair taxes. You know, but those type of things, it is very challenging in these markets. Infrastructure, not as much. You'd be surprised. In the cities, again, electricity and water is available. You just have to look for it and manage it. But
Absolutely.
I think-
Well, yeah, I think we're guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
yeah, this is amazing. You guys are amazing.